Okay, today we're going to be replacing the harmonic balancer on a 98 Buick Century, and this is the part we're going to be putting in, and they sometimes will come off, will start rotting off the there's like a rubber, sort of like a rubber gasket in right here, and this area here, this outside ring will start riding off of the center hub, and will need to be replaced. So and that's what we're going to do here. And first thing we did, we jacked up the car and set it on jack stands, and as always, okay, next we'll be removing the serpentine belt by placing a 3/8 inch drive ratchet or socket handle in the 3/8 inch square hole in the center of the belt tensioner, and pulling up on the ratchet as you slip off the serpentine belt from the alternator pulley. Okay, next we'll be removing the harmonic balancer bolt with a 15mm socket in a 1/2 inch drive breaker bar or large ratchet. Have an assistant jam a large screwdriver or pry bar between the flywheel sprockets and the transaxle case to prevent the engine from turning. So you may need to have an assistant jam a screwdriver on the splines of the flywheel against the case of the transmission to prevent the engine from turning as you pull your harmonic balancer. As you turn the bolt, so you can pull the harmonic balancer, and you'll need to remove the plastic cover that covers the splines and the flywheel, and then once you remove the two bolts, you can remove the plastic cover and get access to the flywheel sprockets. And now we're going to proceed to take off this plastic baffle here, and it's secured with plastic plugs. They look like a screw, but it's just like a plastic plug. You can pull it off. And if you have one of these sets, it makes it easier. It's a set for plastic fasteners. And they usually, sometimes you won't be able to reuse them. Sometimes you can. When we remove this, we can get access to the harmonic balancer. And we'll get this light out of the way here. Once we remove that plastic baffle, we'll need to lower the subframe to be able to get access. And your puller, we're going to be using a puller, a bolt, the bolt type puller, to be able to pull that harmonic balancer off. You cannot use the jaw type puller. You have to use this type, because otherwise, in fact, these are quite tight, and you'll be setting up the bolts right here next. And before we do that, we'll need to we'll need to loosen the subframe right here, almost to the point of taking this one off, and we'll loosen the one on the side. Don't remove the driver's side bolt of the subframe. And this one, you'll be just about close to removing it, and that will give you enough room. This will lower enough so you can get your 3 bolts on the harmonic balancer to be able to pull it off. So we're going to be loosening the subframe here. You use a 3/4 or a 20mm socket. And we'll do the same with the other one on the driver's side. Okay, so we removed the passenger side bolt from the subframe, and we loosened the driver's side. We didn't remove the driver's side. We just loosened it enough, and then we removed the one on the passenger side to be able to get access to the bolts, the 3 bolts here that we're going to be setting up our puller, our harmonic balancer puller on. Okay, so we're using I'm using some old lug nuts, because these bolts are really, the ones that fit on this harmonic balancer are really long, so I'm using 2 lug nuts on each bolt as a spacer. And we'll set up our puller in this way, and you may have to pry a little bit on the subframe right here to get access to this to be able to clear this top bolt here, so you can tighten this top bolt right here, so it'll clear this flange on the car body. Okay, so we got our puller assembled, and we're going to use the insert in front. And that centers the center bolt of the puller on the crankshaft, at the end of the crankshaft, so we can pull it. And we'll be using 19mm socket for this particular puller. Yours might be a little different. And this puller, you can borrow it at places like AutoZone. They'll lend it to you if you don't have one. And you may need to have an assistant put a large screwdriver on the flywheel on the other side, on the flywheel sprockets, to prevent the engine from turning. So you may need to have an assistant jam a screwdriver on the splines of the flywheel against the case of the transmission, to prevent the engine from turning as you as you pull your harmonic balancer, as you turn the bolt so you can pull the harmonic balancer. And you'll need to remove the plastic cover that covers the splines and the flywheel, and then once you remove the two bolts, you can remove the plastic cover and get access to the flywheel sprockets. Okay, so we pulled out our old balancer, and as you can see, it was the outside ring here was coming off of the center hub. I don't know if you can see that. And see right here, this should be, once we remove the puller bolts, you'll be able to see that this area right here has actually moved out. You can see the rubber, it's like a rubber bushing. So this was pretty much kind of ready to come off. And the good part here, as you can see, we're using a good used one. You can get a new, or if you can get it at a junkyard, you can get a good used one. That'll work. That's what we're going to be doing here. And this one, as you can see, it's flush, completely flush. And on the bad one, you see how this area this ring has moved out almost completely. So that would have been a big problem there. And the Serpentine Belt was actually riding on here on the edge of the back edge of the outside ring of the harmonic balancer. Okay, so we're going to be installing our new harmonic balancer, and actually this is it's not a new one. We're actually got a good used one. And make sure you clean, everything's clean, all the mating surfaces, both on the harmonic balancer and on the end of the crankshaft right here. So, okay, so we're going to be applying some moly-based grease on the contact surfaces of the harmonic balancer, and you want to make sure you put it on the inside and on the outside to ease the installation. And the outside is important also because we want to protect the seal. And this is a good time actually to replace that seal also, the oil seal right there. Okay, so we're going to be installing our dampener and our harmonic balancer, I should say. And we want to line the harmonic balancing keyway with the woodruff key on the flywheel, like so. You may also need to drive it in with a block of wood and a mallet, just until you can get the bolt started. And just drive it in evenly. Okay, so we tighten our center bolt as far as it goes all the way in, and now we are going to torque it down to 76 foot-pounds. So we'll use our torque wrench to torque it down to 76 foot-pounds. That's what the specifications for this engine calls for. So we're going to go from the top, and we'll get our 15 millimeter socket, and we're going to go to the top side, and we're going to have our assistant jam the flywheel sprockets so we can torque this down. So you may need to have an assistant jam a screwdriver on the splines of the flywheel against the case of the transmission to prevent the engine from turning as you pull your harmonic balancer. As you turn the bolt, so you can pull the harmonic balancer, and you'll need to remove the plastic cover that covers the splines and the flywheel, and then once you remove the two bolts, you can remove the plastic cover and get access to the flywheel sprockets. Okay, so we torqued it down, and with the help of our assistant, jamming the sprocket with a large screwdriver, the flywheel sprocket, and now we're ready to get and put back a bolt for the subframe. And you may need to jack this up to get it back for it to engage, and we'll do that next. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to tighten up the driver's side subframe bolt, and that should bring up the other side enough to get our passenger side subframe bolt on. And remember, we did not remove the driver's side subframe bolt. We only loosened it enough to lower the subframe, and we removed the passenger side bolt. And in some cars you may not have to completely remove the passenger side. Usually by loosening, you might that be enough to give you access to the so you can mount your puller on the harmonic balancer. Okay, so we first tighten the driver's side subframe bolt, and then we tighten the passenger side bolt as well. Okay, so we're putting on our serpentine belt, and we'll go around the harmonic balancer and around the AC compressor, the air conditioner compressor, and under the water pump pulley, over the power steering pulley, and on this side we're going under and over the belt tensioner, and we're ready to hook it on to our alternator. And then we'll get a we'll use a 3/8 ratchet, and we'll hook it up to our belt tensioner like so. And we're going to be pulling up on it, and we'll get the belt over the alternator pulley. Make sure everything is aligned, and once everything's aligned, you let go of the tensioner, and there's your Serpentine belt installed. Okay, so now we're ready to button it up on this side, and just double check that your belt is it's aligned in all the on all the pulleys. And then we'll put back our plastic baffle here. We're going to need some new fasteners right here, because these usually break when you pull them off. And that concludes this video, and hopefully this video was helpful, and as always, try to stay clean. Just try.